Hi, I'm Matt Pierce. I'm host of The Forge. Today, we've got a great episode for you. We're going to be talking with Cliff Atkinson, who stopped by our studios a little while back. He's going to be talking about how you can make great presentations, some great information in there that I think everyone's going to really like. After that, we're going to be talking about how you can record your tablet device. Got an iPad, Android device. We've got several different options of all price scales to help you get that information off your iPad and into a video on your tablet or your phone. So we're live with The Forge. We'll be right back. All right, a couple things before we get started here. Just to let you know, you can always email us at theforge@techsmith.com. We got people chatting right below, or you can leave comments on our YouTube channel. We'd be happy to answer those and talk with you guys a little bit. We want to know more what you want to see as we go ahead in future episodes of The Forge. Like I said, we had Cliff Atkinson stop by. Cliff is the author of Beyond Bullet Points, and he's also a speaker nationally recognized around the country for talking about how you can make better presentations without bullet points in PowerPoint. So we're going to go to that video. It was recorded a couple weeks ago. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll be right back. In The Forge, and you speak another language, you can actually get access to this book. Cliff, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So first off, let's get our history out of the way. What's your involvement with TechSmith? Not that you work with us or anything, but how did you come to get connected with us?
It was a long time ago when I was just figuring out a good way to be able to get more graphics for PowerPoint presentations. And I was looking for a great screen capture program and came across Snagit, and I've been a big fan ever since. So that was probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Oh,
well, fantastic. And thank you for using the product. So, obviously you're well known for Beyond Bullet Points as an author, but also working with a lot of various groups. I'm sure maybe some even our audience has maybe had you in a workshop with them. Real high level for our audience that maybe is not familiar, what's the kind of the base concept behind the book and what you do?
Well, so the idea behind it was that the book first came out in 2005, and the idea then and still is that you can tell a story whenever you're using a big screen behind you. And so, back then, and even by large part today, people do tend to still present putting text up on the screen. So we're almost using the screen as a teleprompter with our text or index cards.
And we end up reading, right,
exactly,
those words.
We've all experienced presentations like that. And so the idea is that we can step back before you even open up PowerPoint, and almost like a filmmaker would, write a script. What is the core story here that you want to tell? How are you going to make an emotional connection with your audience? What are your 3 most important ideas that you want to get across? How are you going to structure the whole thing? So a good part of the method that I describe in this book is basically how to do that. How to find your story, how to structure your information so it's clear and accessible, and then to turn that into clear and graphically interesting slides.
So I love this idea of storytelling, and I think most people are inherently, they love stories, whether they feel like they're good at telling them or not. Why do you think why is that so successful when people try to use stories versus, obviously lots of text is inherently flawed, but why stories?
Well, it's been around since the dawn of history. That's how we tell information, how we communicate information, basically through story format. And so even at the very earliest graphical representations are these cave paintings, from France in these ancient caves, and people would paint these images of different animals, and I'm sure tell stories about how you hunt, how these were, the mythologies, the stories. This is how information has been transmitted since the dawn of human history. And so somehow along the way, especially the last couple of decades when we started to create these software tools, we kind of forgot that part of story. And fortunately, it is a big trend happening right now in business and across the board in most professions. I want to say the remembering of story and how powerful of a tool that can be in any communication that we attempt to go about creating.
So if I'm someone who maybe is in our audience and is maybe using TechSmith tools, maybe not, and I want to get to the point where I'm confident or at least feeling better about my ability to tell these stories, are there things that someone could do that actually they can work on? Because I have a feeling there's, right out of the gate, there's people who say, you know what, I don't tell stories very well, or I tell stories well. and you break yourself off into one of those groups, and you either are or you aren't. But I don't think that's naturally true. So are there things that someone could do to get better?
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to do, especially these days, as story becomes a more popular topic, is to divide out the difference between an anecdote and a story structure. So an anecdote would be a lot of the ways that we communicate just informally, where we might tell a story about what happened during a project or how we got some great results or things we could learn from. So there's that anecdote, which is really a distillation of something that happened. But then there's also story structure. So now if we move from the anecdote and go to, for example, a screenplay, where somebody is telling a more extended story, there's some really simple building blocks for story. And a lot of these we use in our everyday conversation, but we just don't really identify that as story. So one of those, for example, might be the idea that there's a point A, that your audience is facing a challenge. So we can call that point A. They're where they are right now. And they want to be at point B. So they'd like to get somewhere else from where they are right now. So that point A and that point B, the gap between those two is really the essential building block of a story. You're going to create some unresolved tension. Somebody is at A, they want to be at B. So if you can just simply identify where your audience is and where they'd like to be, then that really becomes that tension, and how you close the gap in that tension is your story structure. So we're really just wanting to make that emotional connection from your audience's perspective. Where are they? Where do they want to be? And that's really the beginning of story.
So it sounds like you've got to, obviously you've got to do a little of your prep work. You've got to think about your audience. You've got to think about the end point.
And that's one of the biggest things. As I was walking around the office, I noticed there's a very popular book called Made to Stick. And in the book, they talk about something called the curse of knowledge. So often we're just so immersed in our thinking, in our projects, all the detail of what we're doing, and we've gone through a certain process where we've learned this ourselves, and then we've gotten so used to the complexity of these topics that we forget what it's like for an audience member who hasn't been through that to see this with fresh eyes, this beginner's mind, to be able to see things from their perspective. And that's actually a wiring that happens in our brain where these patterns get kind of locked in our brain, the way that we're thinking about things, and it's really difficult for us to get outside of that. So that's one of the core pivots that we have to make when we start to present information, is to actually see things from our audience's perspective. So some practical ways that you can do that is to actually go to maybe a group of people who don't have any familiarity with your topic, and to have them start asking you questions about it, to really have them probe what you know, and then from that conversation, then you just conversationally just say, well, here are the 3 most important things that you need to know.
So, and we may have talked, and we were just talking prior to recording today, that, I mentioned one of the challenges, well, this all seems really great. I think, do you get pushback to say, well, that actually sounds like a lot more work. I would rather just dump my stuff onto the PowerPoint, and it's not as effective, but I get it done. I can move on. And if so, is there something that, how do you counter that?
Well, it's all going to be. I work with attorneys on really high-profile cases, and here's a group of folks who will spend any amount of money to persuade an audience to see things their way. These really big, high-profile cases where there's often billion-dollar verdicts or more. So there's a group of folks who are not going to just do something just on the fly. They're going to spend a lot of time, they may even spend months and testing these messages, putting focus groups together for just this single presentation that they give. On the other end of the spectrum, there are presentations where we often have to put together quickly, where we don't, maybe it's not a high stakes presentation. In those situations, it's probably, it's fine for where we're working in to be able to, quickly put something together. But it's all going to be about, what stakes do you have when you're about to deliver this presentation? Are you going to lose business? Could you gain business? Is your reputation at stake? For those types of big presentations, you would want to spend the time and investment into creating a more effective presentation, because there's obviously something you can gain or lose. Absolutely,
but that's not saying that you shouldn't do those things even on maybe on the lower stakes, but maybe it's just the effort to get your story exactly refined and I'm probably not going to a focus group to to figure out my next presentation for my team meeting. But at the same hand, I already know my audience, right? I should have some of those pieces maybe in place. So okay, so obviously there's a lot about storytelling, but there's a lot about visuals, and I think that's another place people get hung up on is to say, I am not visually minded. I don't think with visuals. Maybe I can handle the storytelling part, but I don't think that way. I guess, what would you say to someone if that was their putting all the criticism? Like, well, how do you get around that?
Well, sure, and there is a lot of good emphasis lately, even on the graphics of presentations. But it is possible, in my experience and the experience of teaching a lot of people this method, that the most important thing is that you have a clear story. And if your story is clear and succinct, so for example, I've got a lot of folks who deal with very technical, very technically detailed information. But those folks, when they spend some time on really just boiling this down, here are the three most important things you need to know. That when you've got this simple story structure, that the graphics actually become less important because the story, the underlying story, is really what's driving the communication experience. So I think we do have a lot of cultural focus on the graphics have to be polished and perfect, and they have to look exactly this way and be photoshopped. But it actually turns out that very often, as long as your story is clear, you can actually get away with having a lot simpler graphics, or sometimes it's going to be appropriate to have no graphics at all.
Wow, that's fantastic. So I'm hoping we haven't given away too much of your secrets in here. There's lots more to dig into, I'm sure. If you haven't checked it out, again, it's Beyond Bullet Points, 3rd edition. Cliff, I'm guessing that there's going to be audience members out there that say, wow, I really want to learn more about this idea. I'd like to take it in my organization. How would they go about finding out more besides just maybe buying the book?
Yeah, I think a great place to go is my website at beyondbulletpoints.com. So we have on the screen right now, just the website is up there, and if you go to the home page, we've got a nice YouTube video talking about story and story structure. And then you can sign up at the top for some 6 steps for smarter slides, just the 6 most important things you can do to make your slides and your story clearer and more effective. And if you really want to dive in, we've got a brand new online course that we just launched. If you click on the online course button, just a 3.5-hour course that'll take you into the nuts and bolts of telling a story and creating a compelling storyboard.
So is there going to be lots of PowerPoint with bullet points that I have to go through?
Not at all, just story. Story and interesting visuals.
So, well, Cliff, again, we want to thank you for coming in and taking some time to spend with us and talking about this. If you haven't checked it out, and if you're still making those PowerPoint slides with lots of bullets, please stop. Obviously, our tool works well to help you overcome that, but, check out, again, Beyond Bullet Points. There's lots of great resources, other episodes of The Forge where we've talked to some great visual communicators where you can learn more. Cliff, I guess last question for you. If there's one piece of advice you had to leave with someone who says, I want to try this in my organization, not sure how it's going to go, what would you tell them?
I'd say one thing you could do is figure out what your 3 most important points are and create 3 slides, each one with one of those important points. So just create a 3-slide presentation, each with 1 point per slide, and that'll have dramatically greater impact than 300 slides.
Fantastic. So if you want to hear more, you can always get a hold of us through theforge@techsmith.com. If you send us some emails, some questions, we can always pass them on to Cliff. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to help answer a few of those as well. Again, check out the website beyondbulletpoints.com, and we're looking forward to see someone's 3-slide presentation, no bullet points, maybe just images, maybe a single word, something like that. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we want to thank Cliff Atkinson for stopping by and talking with us. Hopefully those are useful tips for you. We're going to move on to our next segment. We have a very special guest. He's normally sitting back behind the scenes where no one can see him. I'd like to introduce our producer of The Forge, Kelly Rush.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, Kelly, welcome. We're glad you're here. So one of the things that Kelly did, a couple months ago?
Yeah, about 6 or 7 months ago.
6 or 7 months ago is you created a video about how to record a tablet, an iPad specifically, because we get lots of requests. You've got an iPad, you want to record it with Camtasia. How can you do that? It's not an easy feat, but we got a couple options. So Kelly, let's dive right in here because we've got a couple things to go through. So let's start at the high end, the most expensive, but maybe in some ways the easiest path.
Yeah, there's easier and harder parts about this. So there's three things we're going to talk about, and the first one is a hardware method. It uses a HDMI capture card. If Jess can bring up the other camera, hopefully we can show it off here.
So this is the card that you actually put into a tower PC, right? This is not something that's going to work with a laptop.
Correct. Yeah. So you're going to have to. In general, this works best with Windows PCs because the only Mac PCs that actually have a port for these types of devices are the Mac Pros. So most people can't afford those; they're not in the budget.
Okay, so if we look at our capture card, this one is particularly made. Is this by what's the company?
This is made by Avermedia. The card is around $99 and uses HDMI capture, and you can see.
So just take it, plug it in. This slides into your computer. You plug in HDMI in one end. You plug the other end into your device.
Right.
You'll need a converter, correct?
Right. Yeah, and so some of the Android tablets actually have some form of HDMI on them. For the iPad, you're actually going to need this adapter right here, which the HDMI plugs in right there. And then with the capture card also comes some software that will bring up whatever you see on the tablet screen on your computer screen, and then you can use screen capture software like Jang or Camtasia Studio to capture what you're seeing output from the tablet.
Okay, so how much is that going to set somebody back to do it through that particular method?
That particular method, the Avermedia card is $99. The Blackmagic card, which works for Macs, is around $190 or something like that.
Okay, so this is not a cheap option for you guys out there, but it works really well.
It works really well, and the speed is very fast on it, and the lag is a lot slower than it is for the other methods.
Okay, and you're going to get video and audio, so you could use system audio to record.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so that's definitely one option. If you guys want to go that way, you can use the hardware method. We did some investigation. One of the things that we looked for is actually some software ways to do this. Now, if you're on a Mac, let's just put this up front. There are a couple of different options. They seem to work fairly equally well. If you're on a PC, so far there's no option that we found. So if you know of one, feel free to email us at theforge@techsmith.com. Although the one that we're going to show you right now is called Reflection App. It's for the Mac, and we just saw it actually today. Our social media guy, Daniel Foster, showed us a tweet that had actually had said they were working on a Windows version, so maybe there'll be one soon. Cool. So Reflection App will cost you about $15-16, so not too bad. There's another one called Air Server. With Reflection App, basically what you get is a very limited UI. You can go into some preferences and say, change your name of your screen. Jess, can you go to our computer, the Mac? So you can, if you see once we get it switched over, you can see I've got this little window right here. What you get is very limited kind of options, and then we've already synced it up. It's pretty easy to sync up. Once you get you have to be on a wireless network, so it's got to connect that way, and then you go to your iPad. You want to show kind of a split screen here. Jess, if you can show there you go. You basically do the double click, and you get your menu down here. You scroll over and you'll see the AirPlay icon. And once you click on the icon, then it actually does the syncing up. So pretty easy to set up if you're on the same network. Now, one thing that's really interesting about this is that we found here at TechSmith is that it doesn't work on our network. And the reason is because you have to have certain ports available. So like a 7,000 port, and we don't have that open on our network, so it didn't work. But you can see it actually does a pretty good job if we want to do something like a screen chomp here, and as I draw, you're going to get really pretty good real time. We'll do that again there so you can see the real time. So it actually works pretty well. The other thing we tried is this will work with, dropping stuff here. It works with an iPhone, so let me not show the world my password, right? And I go in here. Again, you double click, you scroll over, all the way over, and you get the AirPlay device, and I can then choose the one. Now, we did find earlier in testing you can actually have two devices going at the same time, which was kind of interesting. I don't know exactly if you wanted maybe a side-by-side comparison of your app. If it's a universal app, you could actually do both of those at the same time. It will get audio output. It works pretty well. The other thing you can do, I'm going to turn the phone off just so it's not there. They have a couple other things where you can actually change, like you want it to be a white iPhone. Hey, look at that. Someone's mentioned this on Twitter. Sweet. So So there's a couple good options there for the Mac. Again, there's another one called Air Server. You know, a little bit more lag. It has some other options, but seem to work pretty well.
What's the price between the two?
Both are $15, so not terribly expensive. If you've got a Wi-Fi network, it's going to work fairly easy. You should probably test or talk to your IT people though, because that took us a little while to figure out how to make it work for the demo today.
Right.
But definitely worth it. So
the lag was probably a little bit more noticeable.
Definitely more noticeable than using hardware methodology. So,
but it's still very usable.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So then we have some other options. So these obviously focused on iOS. So Kelly, what do we do if we're not in the Apple camp?
So if you're not in the Apple camp, you're probably using Android. There's some other things out there, but Android's the big one. And like I said before, you can use HDMI to capture Android, but another thing that you can do if you are using an Android device and it's rooted, which means you've taken over control of some of the systems underneath you.
Or another word is jailbroken.
Or jailbroken, yep, the term they use for iOS. So, and there's options for both systems here. There are options available if you've rooted your device to allow you to record the tablet screen directly on the device. And one option I have here is called, I think it's Screencast Recorder or something like that.
Okay.
But anyway, so you just bring up the application. You can see there's a start button right there. We'll tap it. And now it went away, but it is recording. So whatever you do on your screen, it'll bring it up. So we'll just go into the menu real quick. Let's go back out.
And is it recording your audio as well, what you say, or the device audio?
It would be recording what you're saying. On this particular tablet, the microphone doesn't work, but normally it would be recording your voice. No, I don't think it records the tablet's device audio.
Which is one of the advantages of like the Reflection app. It actually does record you can get the audio to go through. Now, one thing I think I should mention with a lot of these, some of these solutions weren't meant for recordings, like screencasting purposes. It's like, I want to show what's on my iPod on my screen.
Right.
I use it as a monitor. So it's not always meant to be super fast and quick. Not optimized for that purpose.
Right, exactly. And that's where something like Camtasia Studio comes in. We just record whatever's happening on the screen. So it's kind of a workaround. So anyway, you saw that I pressed the button to stop recording, and then you can see the list of all the recordings you've made in here. We'll hit video and hit play. And you can see it playing back right there. And it does pretty well. Another thing that's nice about recording it directly on the device, it's kind of tough to see on this video, but you actually get to see the finger motions on the screen. So it draws an icon on there. So that's kind of nice. It's something that's not available in either the HDMI or the streaming method. Yeah,
you just see the movement. You don't actually see you see the results of it, but you don't see where they've tapped or what, when an action happens. So.
Exactly.
Okay, so one thing I think we should mention is that with that device, with that kind of step, if you want to root it or jailbreak it, whatever you call it, there's obviously some drawbacks to doing that. If you're using a company device, they probably have policies against that.
Right. It's a little bit trickier depending on the device. Some devices it's really easy to do. Some of them there's more steps involved. So it really depends on your device.
And we should say in some cases it actually voids your warranty. So
who cares about that?
Yeah, if you don't care about those things and this is the way you want to go, obviously that's probably a good solution. But hopefully, so you got the capture card, you've got a couple apps, and hopefully on the PC, like something like Reflection will be coming soon. And then of course you can always root your machine and get to it that way.
Right. So what's your favorite method?
Well, because I don't want to root my device because I like my warranties. I actually really found Reflection easy, and it took me a while to figure out at work why it wasn't working, and it's because of the policies on our network. But when I took it home, man, it worked really quick, and I got some good results. I know the lag is a concern, but I was playing a pretty action-packed air hockey game, and for the most part, it kept up. I mean, there's a couple times it was I actually had more problem with rotation when I rotated the device. It didn't flip, and so the score was backwards. So what about you though, Kelly? You do lots of video, and so
I think probably my preferred way to go is through HDMI capture, just because it's so fast. The lag on it is sub 1 millisecond, so it's tough to beat that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So you might have comments or suggestions or ideas, questions that you want to ask about capturing your tablet devices. Please feel free to email us at theforge@techsmith.com. You can also reach out to @TechSmith on Twitter. You can use the hashtag TSCForge, and we'll be happy to respond to any comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas, whatever it might be. So I do want to mention before we go that next month, May 17th, mark your calendar, May 17th, very important date. It's our next episode of The Forge. We've got a guest person coming. She is awesome. Jess, if you want to switch over to the Mac screen, her name is Brandy Agerbeck. She has a new book out, The Graphics Facilitator Guide. She's a graphic facilitator. You should check it out. She's going to be on the show talking to us about graphic facilitation and how that can help in conversation. So, May 17th, big day. Again, you can email us at theforge@techsmith.com. We want to thank Kelly Rush for taking some time to figure out all these cool ways to capture your tablet devices. We want to thanks to our crew for running the show. And most of all, thanks to you for watching. It's been a great show. We'll talk to you later. Thanks.